Parshat Korach. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kehat ben Levi Vedatan va'Aviram b'nei Eliav v'on ben Pelet b'nei Reuven. The parsha is strange from the beginning. Korach took, but it doesn't tell us, never tells us what he took. Not only does it never tell us what he took, so Vayikach is the wrong word, but in fact, Vayikach is constructed the wrong way. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kehat ben Levi is one person, Datan v'Aviram are two others, and On ben Pelet is a fourth. So if anything, it should be Vayikchu. Whatever it is that they took it. Torah never solves that mystery, and one gets the sense that perhaps the Torah has left it hanging on purpose. Number one, the Torah has left hanging what Korach and his compatriots have taken, and number two, the Torah surprised us on purpose. The Torah didn't tell us at the beginning that this was a group. It made it sound like it was an individual. And then another two individuals, and then another individual. And then in the next pasuk, Vayakumu l'fnei Moshe, they got up before Moshe. We're expecting that these four people got up before Moshe. We're not expecting anything untoward at this point, anything wrong. Other people have stood before Moshe to make legitimate requests. V'anashim mibnei Yisrael 50 u'matayim, and then suddenly there are 250 more people. So it went from 1 to 4 to 250 pretty quickly, growing at each step. Nisiyei Eda, Kriyei Moed, Anshei Shem. These are famous people who are leaders, people who are well known and powerful. And suddenly we're getting a little bit of a sense of foreboding, a little bit of sense that something is actually about to go wrong. And we look back at that first pasuk, and we see that there's something here that doesn't quite fit. Korach is a Levi, and he's traced all the way back to Levi. Datan, Aviram, and On are B'nai Reuven. What do B'nai Levi and B'nai Reuven have to do with each other? Why are they together? Why are they working together? What joint request could they have to pose to Moshe? What joint interest could they have? And then, Pasuk Gimel, finally everything comes out. It's not just a request, it's not just a question. Vayikahalu al Moshe v'al Aaron. So now we add not just Moshe, like in the previous Pasuk, that they stood up before Moshe, but they gathered on Moshe and Aaron, right? In other words, the theme, the pattern that we've seen of expansion from one person to 4 and then to 250, and then from taking to gathering upon to surrounding, is also enhanced by first just Moshe and then Moshe and Aaron. So Vayikahalu al Moshe v'al Aaron, they gathered, they congregated upon Moshe and Aaron, Vayimru alehem, and they said to them, Rav lachem, with no preamble, with no introduction, no warning, Rav lachem, you have too much. You have taken too much. Ki chol ha'ida kulam kedoshim. All of the nation is holy. U'v'tocham Hashem, and Hashem is among all of them. U'madua titnaseu al kahal Hashem. Why do you raise yourselves above God's nation? Unlike previous complaints, the people complaining here are not wondering whether Hashem is with them at all. Maybe Hashem isn't a part of this. Maybe you've just fooled us. No, in fact, the fact that Hashem is among them is apparently the source of their complaint. Because Hashem is among us and we are all so special, why do you get to be more special than special? You have taken too much, they say to Moshe and Aaron. And we can assume that they are criticizing Moshe for his leadership, his political leadership, and Aaron for his being Kohen. After all, the only Kohanim are he and his sons. He the Kohen Gadol, and they the Kohanim Hedutim. Vayishma Moshe vayipal panav. Moshe hears and falls on his face. It's a mixture of dismay and disappointment and shock. And the effect of the Torah is purposely misleading us beforehand making it sound like it was just one individual, Vayikach, making it sound innocent, Vayikach, Vayakumu, and then finally breaking the news to us with Vayikahalu al, and building up from Korach to Onben to the Tan, Aviram, and On, and then the Chamishim Matayim Ish. So the shock registers on Moshe, who is as surprised as anyone else, as surprised as we the reader are. The Torah has ambushed us, and Korach and his people have ambushed Moshe. And that's why the Torah wrote it this way, perhaps. Moshe falls on his face. This is the last thing he expected. Vaydeber al Korach ve'al kol hadato lemor. He speaks to Korach and his people, saying, which is interesting because it wasn't clear until this point that Korach was the leader. You might have thought that Korach, Datan, Aviram, and On are all the leaders. But apparently Moshe is addressing only Korach and his Eidah. And we can assume at this point that this includes everyone. Korach, Datan, Aviram, On, and the 250. Le'mor, and he said, Boker v'yoda Hashem et asher lo. In the morning Hashem will make known who is his. Ve'et HaKadosh, and who is holy, v'hikriv elev, and will draw that person, that one, close to him. Ve'et asher yivchar bo yakriv elev, and the one who he chooses, he will bring close to him. Zot asu. Here's what you should do. Do thus. K'chu lechem machtot Korach v'cho adato. Take fire pans for yourself, Korach and all of your people. Utnu v'hen ish, and place fire in them. V'simu alehen ketoret, and place upon the fire upon the coals incense. Lifnei Hashem b'char, before Hashem, and Hashem is present tomorrow. V'haya ha'ish asher yivchar Hashem hu hakadosh, and whoever is chosen, the man chosen by Hashem, that is the Holy One. Rav Lachem b'nei Levi. They had started out by saying Rav Lachem to Moshe, and Moshe finishes by saying Rav Lachem to you. So it's bookends, beginning with Rav Lachem and ending with Rav Lachem. The first thing Moshe proposes is a test. Then, Pasuk Chet, Vayomer Moshe al Korach, Shimuna b'nei Levi. Listen up, Levites, listen up, sons of Levi. And it's strange, Moshe was just talking. So why does the Torah introduce this statement of Moshe's with Vayomer Moshe? And indeed, why are there two statements? Apparently, Moshe paused. Moshe paused after proposing his test, the great Ketoret cook-off, and paused. He was waiting for something. And then he continues now, and he says, listen to me, B'nai Levi. Hama'at mikem ki hivdil elokei Yisrael atem me'adat Yisrael. Is it little to you, right? Picking up on the Rav Lachem, so now Ma'at Lachem. Is it little to you that Hashem, God of Israel, separated you, me'adat Yisrael, from the congregation? La'akriv etchem elav, to bring you close to him, la'avod avodat Mishkan Hashem, to work the work of the Mishkan, v'la'amod l'fnei ha'idel shartam, and to stand before the people and serve them. V'yakriv otcha ve'et kol achecha b'nei Levi itach, and he brought you close, in other words, you standing here, and all the other Levites with you. Uvikashtem gam kehuna. And now what you're seeking is kehuna. Moshe sees directly through what they have said. What they had said sounded very egalitarian. They hadn't said, we want to be Kohanim. They had said, why should you be holier than anyone else? On the face of it, what they were saying is that everyone should be equal, and there should be no divisions within the people. Hashem is among all of us. Hashem is with all of us, and Hashem is among everyone, and His sanctity pervades the entire nation. So why should there be Kohanim? Now, of course, if they really meant that, if they really were honest about it, then what they would have said was at least two things, or maybe one thing, but one other thing, not the thing that they did say. What they did say is, why are you Kohanim? Why are you lifting yourself above the Am Hashem? If they really were in favor of everyone's being equal, of total egalitarianism, what they really should have said was, look, we're really a little uncomfortable to have been singled out and to be made into Leviim. What we really want is just to be regular Jews, all of whom are holy, and Hashem is among all of them. So please take away our status as Leviim and let us just be regular Jews. And then perhaps, in addition to that, they could have also said, and since it bothers us that there are these divisions of holiness, we also want to recommend that you also not be Kohanim. But they didn't say that. They didn't say, we don't want to be Leviim, we're bothered by being singled out for greater holiness. They said, what bothers us is that you have raised yourselves above the nation of Israel, and everyone is holy, so what you've done is inappropriate. Since they didn't say that our status as being Levim is inappropriate, Moshe saw that that really wasn't what was bothering them. They didn't want to say, we want to be Kohanim, why do you get to be Kohanim? That would sound childish and selfish. So instead, what they say is, we don't want anyone to have prominence. Kind of like the two women who come to Shlomo HaMelech, and one of them says, you know what, neither of us should have a child. Right? Of course, she wants the child, but she can't claim the child for herself. So instead, she says, neither of us should have it. But of course, what she really wants is a child, and if she could get away with that, then she would, but she can't, so she doesn't claim that. So Moshe says to them, "Ubikashtem gam kiuna." I see what you really want. In other words, Moshe throws it right back at them. If you're really against divisions within Klal Yisrael, so who has been divided more than you? You have been raised above Klal Yisrael, but I see you didn't complain about that. So instead, what you're complaining about is "Ubikashtem gam kiuna." Number one, you're happy to have been singled out and to be made into Levim. But for some reason, not only are you happy with that, in other words, that doesn't bother you, but that's in fact not even enough for you. So far from the splits in sanctity bothering you, in fact, you're happy about them. You're just not happy that they didn't go the way that you would have preferred, which is with you on top. All of you people are really gathering against Hashem. I want you to know this is not Aaron's decision, it's not my decision, it was Hashem's decision. Aaron isn't your target. Aaron isn't the target for your complaints. And then something very surprising happens. You know what, before we go to that, let's just discuss the two halves of Moshe's statement. First, Moshe says to them, you know what, we're going to do a test. Tomorrow Hashem is going to settle all complaints, and it will be very clear, and no one will be able to argue. We'll settle everything. Hashem will choose. Tomorrow we'll all show up with our Ketoret, and whoever is Ketoret, Hashem accepts. So that's the one Hashem wants to be the Kohen, the one to serve him. And you can imagine what's going to happen to the other side. Everyone remembers what happened the last time people tried to bring Ketoret in the wrong circumstances. Now that was Nadav and Abihu. Those were the right people. Those were the Kohanim, just in the wrong circumstances. And even so, they ended up paying with their lives. So Korach and his people know that this is a test where the price of failure is death. The price of failure is fatal. That's the first thing Moshe says. The second thing he says, look, you guys are really wrong. First of all, I know what you really want. You really want greater greatness than you've already been granted. And second of all, you're wrong for wanting it. So Moshe lays on the table exactly what's going on here beneath the surface, and then says, look, you have already gotten a great deal, and you should be happy with that. Why does he say it in this order? Why does Moshe first propose the test, and then pause, and then try to reason with the Bnei Levi? So I believe the reason is as follows. If Moshe had tried to reason with them first, they would have said, as most self-righteous people would say in this position, you know what? He's reasoning with us. He's not so sure of his position. Maybe there's something shakable about his position. He's not so confident, and it would have encouraged them rather than discouraging them. Moshe tries something else instead. The first thing he tries is an expression of confidence. He says, look, you know what? This really isn't my issue at all. I don't want to convince you. It's really up to you to be convinced. We'll have a test tomorrow. We'll let God decide. It's very simple. I'm not arguing with you. Let's not argue. Let's just let God decide. So Moshe is expressing full confidence, and it's such a brilliant strategy. They would never listen to him unless he first gets across that he's absolutely confident in his position. And the question really isn't who is holy and who is chosen. Moshe is confident and secure about that. The question is only, will I convince you today, or will you be convinced tomorrow morning, and in a very violent and final way? It's really up to you. So first he proposes the test, and he pauses, because he's waiting for them to say, you know what? Maybe we won't do that. Maybe we remember the last time someone brought Ketoret when Hashem didn't want that Ketoret, and maybe that's a risky thing for us to do. So instead of doing that, we'll just rethink this and we'll get back to you. But that doesn't happen. They hear what Moshe says, but they're not scared off. And so Moshe tries to work reason. The reason doesn't work, and they remain steadfast. And as we know, they will come up tomorrow morning with their fire pans. And then the Chumash continues, and in a very surprising way. In Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayishlach Moshe l'krov l'Datan v'Aviram, Moshe sends for Datan and Aviram. Bnei Eliyav, the sons of Eliyav, Vayomru lo na'alen, they say, we're not going up to Moshe. He wants to meet with us? We're not going. Let the mountain come to us. We're not going to him. Right? Hama'at ki ha'elitanu me'eretz avat chalav u'dvash. Right, so echoing, mocking Moshe. Moshe had just said, Hama'at mikem, is it little to you? He said in Pasuk Tet, Hama'at mikem ki hivdil Elokei Yisrael atchem, is it nothing that Hashem has separated you? So, mocking Moshe, they say, Hama'at ki ha'elitanu me'eretz avat chalav u'dvash. Is it nothing? Is it a small thing that you have brought us, dragged us out of the land flowing with milk and honey, Mitzrayim, that beautiful, wonderful land we were so comfortable? Lahamitenu b'midbar, and you've dragged us out here to kill us in the desert. Ki tistarer aleinu gam histarer. Now you're going to lord it over us also. You're going to send me a summons, Datan v'Aviram, right now show up at my tent, at my palace. Af lo al eretz zavat chalav u'dvash haviotanu. You haven't brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey. V'atitem lanu nachlat sadeh v'chareb, and given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. In other words, as everyone knows, they're going nowhere. The whole promise of this whole journey in Sefer B'midbar was that we're going to the Eretz Avat Chalav U'Dvash. But now, after the Meraglim disaster, they're turning it around on Moshe. They're not saying, look, we're not going anywhere. They're saying, look, this is your failure. This is your failure. You brought us out of a wonderful land, and now we're going to die here in the desert. Why are we going to die here in the desert? Not, the usual complaint out of hunger, out of thirst, out of whatever. What they're saying is, the reason why we're going to die in the desert over the next 38 years, slowly but surely, and never enter the Eretz Avat Chalav U'Dvash, is because of you. You have failed us. You. So they're turning around the whole Meraglim disaster and placing it in Moshe's door. Ha'enei ha'anashim ha'im tinaker. Lo na'alat, what are you going to do? Gouge out everyone's eyes, so we can't see, we can't look around and see that we're in the middle of nowhere here, and there's no fields and vineyards and milk and honey? So the first thing that's so strange about this whole scene is that you and I didn't realize that Datan and Aviram weren't there already. If you look back at the beginning, Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kad ben Levi v'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliyav v'on ben Pelt b'nei Ruvain. Everybody's together. Everyone sort of grabs whatever they grab, Vayikach. They grab initiative, they grab chutzpah, they grab whatever it happens to be. They get together. Vayakumu l'fnei Moshe, right? And they get up before Moshe. So we think that they're standing before Moshe. And we are very surprised to hear in Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayishlach Moshe l'krol Datan v'Aviram. What do you mean he called to summon Datan and Aviram? Weren't they there? They were there the whole time, weren't they? Now the truth is that we should have noted earlier on that there was a problem. The problem was that Moshe, in other words, there was an indication already that we were on the wrong track. Because Moshe, every time he speaks, he says in Pasuk Hey, Vaydaber al Korach ve'al kol adato limor. Moshe speaks to Korach and his people and says, we're going to have a test tomorrow with the Ketorah. So first of all, Korach ve'kol adato, where did Datan, Aviram, and On go? Okay, so we told ourselves at that point that the adato included not only the 250 people, but included also these three others. But it was a little strange that suddenly, all those who had been mentioned by name, in other words, they were prominent, they weren't just the 250 random leaders, they had been mentioned by name, and suddenly they disappeared. So that was strange. Now, stranger yet was that Moshe's test addressed only the people who wanted to be Kohanim. So unless we somehow thought that their complaint was that Datan and Aviram and On, who were Bnei Reuven, wanted to be Kohanim, and they were gonna test this out with Moshe. So then Moshe's response seems very strange. In other words, if they were just Levium, then Moshe's response would seem very well on target. They're complaining that, we're not Kohanim, we want to be Kohanim, it's not fair. And Moshe says, okay, you want to be Kohanim, you get your chance tomorrow. But what were the Bnei Ruvain complaining about? They were complaining that they didn't get to be Kohanim? Now, the truth is, maybe they were, Originally, Avodah in the Mishkan was supposed to be done by Bechorot, was supposed to be done by the firstborn. So maybe Ruvain was feeling cheated, not only that he doesn't, that he's not Shevet Levi, but that he's not, in fact, a Kohanim, because originally it was his, right? So maybe that's what Ruvain and Levi share in common, is that they both feel cheated of being Kohanim. Ruvain, because he's the Bechor, who in traditional times had been the Kohen, and Levi also. Okay. Except when we get to the end of Pasuk Zayin, so when Moshe says Rav Lachem B'nei Levi, Hashem has done a lot for you, B'nei Levi. When we're asking ourselves, what do you mean B'nei Levi? Yeah, that explains a lot. That sort of explains Korach. And perhaps even these 250 people are Levium. We didn't know that they were Levium, but okay, maybe they're Levium. But it doesn't explain Datan and Aviram and On. So why is he calling them all B'nai Levi? Pasuk Chet Shimuna B'nai Levi. Right? So he says it again, his second part of his statement. Is it nothing that he has separated you in Pasuk Yud, Ve'et Kol Achacha B'nai Levi Itach, and all of Levium with you, all of your brothers with you, he's made you all special. Uvikashtem Gam Kehuna. Right, so Moshe clearly is on our side. In other words, Moshe shares our understanding that this is all about Levium. And in fact, it becomes clear that Pasuk Aleph, which mentioned Korach and the Bnei Ruvain, wasn't actually describing the events as they happened. It's describing a rebellion which actually has two different prongs to it. A rebellion which has two different tracks. A rebellion, in fact, which has two different locations. The people who come to Moshe and Aaron are Korach and his 250 people, and they're complaining about being Kohanim. And so Moshe responds to them about being Kohanim. Fine, we'll test it out tomorrow. And then he tries to convince them as well. And then, knowing that there's another half to the rebellion because he has heard word of their rebellion, he sends for Datan and Aviram, who are apparently not even there. They're at a different location. And then they say they're not coming. And then they begin to insult Moshe Rabbeinu. And if you look carefully in their words, there's nothing about Aaron. And the reason why there's nothing about Aaron in the words of Datan and Aviram is because Aaron was never their problem. Moshe was their problem. In other words, if we take a step back from this rebellion as it begins to develop and as the pieces begin to become clearer, the Torah introduced it as one rebellion, Korach, and Datan, Aviram, and On, the Bnei Levi and the Bnei Ruvain. But as things actually shake out, it's two separate rebellions. First the Bnei Levi, and then the Bnei Ruvain. Now, what Moshe is discovering is that this half of the rebellion is aimed at him. So they say to Moshe, is it nothing that you let us out of the land flowing with milk and honey into this wasteland, into this nothing, this desert, to die here? It's all your fault. And now you're going to lord it over us? Now you're going to boss us around and push us around? What, are you going to rip out our eyes so we can't see that we're in this barren wasteland? Pasuk Tetvav continues, Vayichar leMoshe me'od. Moshe was so upset, Moshe was so angry. But not only was Moshe angry, listen carefully to how Moshe reacts. Vayomer al Hashem, al teifen el minchatam. Moshe says to Hashem, do not turn to their mincha. Do not accept their offering. What offering? What offering? Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I did not steal even one donkey from them. Velo hareoti et echad mehem, and I did not do evil towards even one of them. What's going on? Why is Moshe now suddenly angry? If he wasn't angry before, why is he angry now? Number one. Number two, he's not having a Ketoret competition with Datan and Aviram, who just mouthed off to him and expressed such chutzpah. So why now is he suddenly going back and relating to the Ketoret competition and saying to Hashem, don't accept their Ketoret? That's not Datan and Aviram who just clashed with him. The third question is, and this is even more troubling, perhaps the most troubling of all, when Moshe proposed the Ketoret competition, so he expressed no doubts at all. It was his idea. In other words, if Hashem had said it, so he could have said, if Hashem had said, you know what, we'll have a test tomorrow, then Moshe, you could imagine, Moshe might have said, you know what, please Hashem, accept Aaron's offering and not theirs. But this was Moshe's idea, so of course, he would only propose such a thing if he were 100% confident that Hashem would be on his side. So, where does Moshe now entirely lose confidence? How is it that Moshe loses confidence now and has to turn to Hashem and say, please don't take any of their Ketoret, and has to justify himself and say, I have never done anything wrong to these people? As if to say, you know, I understand that you, Hashem, might think that we're sort of on equal footing here, me and these people, and I want you to know, I have never abused my authority. You know, they're accusing me of having mistreated my authority, and lo chamor echad mehem nasati v'lo harayoti et echad mehem. What's going on here? So, perhaps the answer is that we, the reader, in a way, are as surprised as Moshe. Perhaps the answer is exactly that. Moshe looked at the rebellion of Korach and the Bnei Levi, and he saw a challenge to Aaron, because they said, Kol ha'ida kulam kedoshim u'v'tocham Hashem u'madua titnaseu al ka'al Hashem. They heard a challenge to Aaron. Everyone is kadosh, everyone is holy. So why are you making yourselves more kadosh? That's a challenge only to Aaron, because Aaron's authority is based on his kedusha. Moshe's authority isn't based on his kedusha, it's based on his authority, on his power, on his direct connection to Hashem, on the instructions from Hashem. In short, Moshe did not understand, until this very point, when he summoned Datan and Aviram, he did not understand that there were two rebellions going on here. A rebellion against the Bnei Levi against Aaron, and a rebellion of the Bnei Ruvain against him. Moshe was able to react confidently, and I wouldn't say blithely. He's obviously terribly, terribly upset by Pol Panav, and he's clearly so upset by their suggestion and by their lack of trust in him as Hashem's representative, and that he didn't make this whole thing up himself. At the same time, you don't see Moshe's confidence shaken at all, and Moshe isn't angry, and Moshe isn't upset. He's sorrowful. I mean, these people are going straight off the derech. Basically, having seen their dreams go up in smoke, and having received the bitter news that they're going nowhere, so all of their petty jealousies come bubbling to the surface. All the different dreams and disappointments that they had, that they would have been willing to suppress if they had been promised and thought they would receive this glorious future, this wonderful march into Eretz Yisrael. So now that they know that they're going nowhere, so they have no patience to suppress those things anymore, and all of their petty jealousies and desires come bubbling to the surface. So Moshe sees that, understands it also has to be put down and has to be solved quickly, and so he says, okay, so we're going to have a competition tomorrow, and tries to convince them. But then, when Datan and Aviram refuse his summons and mock him and accuse him of being responsible for the failure of the whole nation, and they say to him, Ki tistarer aleinu gam histarer, that you now lord over us. So for the first time, Moshe understands that he has until now not understood. He understands that there are two parts to this rebellion. It is a rebellion against the brothers, against the Bnei Amram, against Aaron the Kohen Gadol by the Leviim, and against Moshe, the leader of the nation, by Ruvain. Ruvain is revolting, not because he is a disappointed Kohen. Ruvain is revolting because he is a disappointed leader, a disappointed Bechor, the one who was passed over. The effect on Moshe is catastrophic. Not only does Moshe now have, intellectually a greater understanding of what's going on, it's not only that Moshe sort of can take aim and can react appropriately now. Look at how terribly the rebellion hurts him. Immediately, Vayichar Moshe me'od. Moshe is so upset. Moshe is so angry. He's so angry now because it's personal, because it's aimed against him. When he was defending his brother, so he could be detached, he could be even keeled, he could even be logical. But at this point, logic deserts Moshe. And he turns to Hashem and he says, don't accept their mincha, don't accept their ketoret, as if such a thing were possible. Moshe, better than anyone, knows that it was Hashem's command that appointed Aaron as the Kohen. And Korach and his buddies, Korach and his Eidah, as the Leviim. Who knows that better than Moshe? Who knows better than Moshe that there's no way Hashem would be nifnei leminchatam? And yet Moshe, having been torn down, having been cut off at the knees so cruelly, is in a crisis of confidence about both. In other words, having been attacked, having been made the target of the rebellion of Datan, Aviram, and the Bnei Reuven, so Moshe has lost all confidence about both tracks. So now he's thinking, you know what? Maybe it's possible that Hashem would turn to their mincha tomorrow. Maybe it wasn't so smart of me to have proposed that test for tomorrow. So he says to Hashem, please don't turn to them, don't accept their mincha. I've never done anything inappropriate with my leadership. And you could see the anger and the hurt, and even the illogic of it all. There's no chance that the Hashem who just yelled at Miriam and Aaron and said about Moshe, Bechol beiti ne'amanhu, Lo kain avdi Moshe, my servant Moshe, my Moshe is nothing like you, Hashem said to his other Nevi'im. Moshe is my right-hand man. Pe'al pe'ah dabrabo, I speak to him face to face, mouth to mouth. He's nothing like anyone else. Moshe himself has forgotten his special status and is begging Hashem not to treat him as Korach's equal. Pasuk Tet Zayin, Vayomer Moshe al Korach, Ata v'chol adatcha, hayu lifnei Hashem, Ata v'hem v'Aaron machar. Everybody be in front of Hashem tomorrow. K'chu ish machtato, natatem alehem ketoret, v'yikravtem lifnei Hashem ish machtato, 50 u'matayim machtot, v'ata v'Aaron ish machtato. Everybody has to be ready. V'yikchu ish machtato, v'yitnu alehem eish, v'yasimu alehem ketoret, v'yandu petach u'moed u'Moshe v'Aaron. The next day, in other words, the action goes like that. The Torah collapses that day and the next morning into a second, into an instant. And they're standing there ready. Vayakel alehem Korach et kol heidah, and Korach gathers the whole people against them. El petach ol moed vayirach v'od Hashem al kol heidah. And it's fascinating that the person to gather the Eidah isn't Moshe. The person to gather all the people is Korach. And it's hard to avoid suggesting that this is another expression of Moshe's doubt, Moshe's self-doubt. He didn't gather the people because he wasn't sure what would happen. Korach, overconfident and blustering, was so sure that he gathered everyone to witness it, and of course, basically created the audience for his own demise. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe v'el Aaron limor. Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, Hibadlu mitoch ha'ida azot, separate yourselves from these people, va'achalei otam karag, and I will destroy them in a moment. Vayiplu paneim vayimru, they fall on their faces and they say, El Elohei haruchot l'chol basar, God of all flesh, of the spirits of all flesh, ha'ish achad yachta ve'al kol ha'ida tiktsof. One person should sin, and you should be angry at everyone. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe limor, daber l'ha'ida lemor. Hashem says to Moshe, tell the people, He'alu misaviv b'mishkan Korach, Datan v'Aviram. Separate yourselves from the Mishkan of Korach, Datan, and Aviram. And here you wonder, when it says Mishkan, Korach, Datan v'Aviram, was there one Mishkan, almost like an anti-Mishkan? There's Moshe's Mishkan, and then there's another Mishkan, Mishkan Korach, Datan v'Aviram, the rebellion headquarters? Or does Hashem mean they should separate themselves from the Mishkan of Korach, the Mishkan of Datan, and the Mishkan of Aviram? In other words, everyone should get away from their homes. So Moshe selflessly, humbly goes to Datan and Aviram. In other words, they had said, we're not coming up to him. If he wants to talk to us, let him come here. So Moshe goes to them. And the Ziknei Yisrael follow Moshe. You see, Moshe still has a following. Moshe says, move away from these people and everything that they have, so that you are not sucked down with them. And the people all separated themselves. It sounds here that there's not one Mishkan Korach Datan v'Aviram, because it says that Datan v'Aviram came out of their tents with their families, and they're Yatzu Nitzavim, they came out standing proudly, standing tall, defiantly. Vayomer Moshe bezot tedu'un ki Hashem shalachani la'asot et kol ha'ma'asim ha'ela ki lo milibi. Moshe announces to everyone, this is how you will know that Hashem sent me to do this, and it was not from my own heart, this is not of my origination. Im kamot kol ha'adam yumutun ela ufkudat kol adam yipoked alehem lo Hashem shalachani. If these people die a natural death, Hashem did not send me. Ve'im briya yivra Hashem u'patzta ha'adam at piha u'vala'a utam ve'ekal asher lahem v'yardu chaim sha'ola. If the ground opens up and swallows them, and they go down alive into the earth, into the grave, vidaten ki niyatzu ha'anashim ha'elat Hashem, then you will all know that these people have irritated God. The ground opens up the moment Moshe finishes speaking, and swallows them and everything that is theirs. They go down living into the grave, and they are lost. Everyone goes running, screaming away, saying the ground is going to destroy us. Just as in the case of Datan and Aviram, the Eish, the fire of Hashem, comes out and consumes not only the Ketoret, but consumes the people presenting it. Turn ahead to Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Vav. The people you would expect would be impressed, the people would be quieted, would be pacified, would accept Moshe as their leader. Quite the opposite. You're killers. You've killed the Jews, Hashem's holy people. It's unbelievable. As if Moshe could work these miracles without the direct cooperation of Hashem. Atem hamitem et am Hashem. You have killed the nation of God, they say to him. And Hashem comes out, and Moshe and Aaron come to Hashem. In other words, what can you do with these people? What can you prove to them? Even when Hashem himself shows up and does a miracle that shows who his true representatives are, the people still take their godly chosenness and they beat Moshe and Aaron over the head with that. It's unbelievable. And so that's what Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron. Separate yourself from these people. Look, I'm done. I'm done with these people. I was done with them after the Egel. I was done with them at the Meraglim. I was done with them 5 minutes ago, and now I'm surely done with them. Let us be done with them, and let us make you into a great nation. And so, now comes the moment of great selflessness. The moment of great selflessness, which shows the side of Aaron, which is opposite of what happened at the Egel. In the aftermath of the Egel, the one who Moshe summoned, the one to whom Moshe said, Mi Lashem Eli, who is faithful to Hashem, gather to me, and says, Vayikbitzu elav kol bnei Levi, that all of the sons of Levi gathered to Moshe, and they were used there for the violent purpose of slaughtering all those who had worshipped the Egel. Now, Aaron, the choicest of the Levi, the most select of the Levi, is the one to save lives. Moshe instructs Aaron and says, Yud Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph, quickly grab Ketoret and run into the middle of the people. Hashem has begun the plague that will begin and end with the death of the entire people. Only you can stop it. Apparently Moshe can't stop it. Only Aaron can stop it. And so Aaron is able to, right? So the very stroke which triggered the death of the people, that stroke is also what preserves their lives. And Aaron is able to stop. In other words, it's Aaron's action which publicly in front of the people is saving their lives. And thousands and thousands of people are dead, and yet it's not enough. There's another test that has to be made. Hashem then prescribes that all the leaders of the tribes are to put their staffs, their matot, by the Moed, and the one that flowers is the one that's chosen. In other words, Hashem is trying to show with this test, Moshe's tests were tests of death. Moshe's test, his first test, was the test of the Ketoret. Whoever's the wrong man holding the Ketoret will die. And that's what happened. Whoever's the wrong man will be swallowed up by the earth, will die. That was Moshe's test. Hashem then provided the opportunity for two tests, which allowed the people who were chosen to be the givers of life. In other words, instead of prosecuting the evil, promoting the good. Aaron is able to save the people's lives with the Ketoret, and then the Matev, the one who was chosen by Hashem, a dead stick, right, a stick with no life to it, suddenly grows branches and flowers and bears fruit. So again, Vayimi Macharat, Pasuk Chav Gimel, Vayimi Macharat, on the next day, Vayavo Moshe al Haidut V'nei Parach Mateh Haron Leveit Levi. So Aaron's Mateh has flowered, Vayotzei Parach, flowers came out, Vayatzei Tzitz, Vayigmol Shkedim, and in fact grew Shkedim, grew almonds. Vayotzei Moshe et kol matot mifnei Hashem al kol bnei Yisrael vayiru vayikchu ish matehu. And it's amazing. The people's reaction is quiet. Vayiru, they saw, vayikchu ish matehu. Each man just took his stick and went. And that's the best reaction you could hope for. They're not going to jump around Aaron and start dancing around him and say, "You are the chosen of Hashem," and start kissing his feet. But at least to acknowledge him as the leader. The rest of the parsha continues with a clear demarcation of the roles of the Kohanim and the Leviim, because apparently it hasn't been made clear enough. The Leviim still think that they could possibly succeed to the office of Kohen. And so it's necessary to clarify those boundaries even further. From one perspective, it looks like Moshe comes out of our parsha strengthened, having been supported by Hashem, having been tested and having been found, along with his brother Aaron, to be the real thing. However, under the surface, the price that Moshe Rabbeinu pays is the price that we will see him pay in full in next week's parsha, in Parshat Chukat, where Moshe himself will suffer the same fate as the rest of the nation has already suffered, the decree that he will spend the rest of his career, the rest of his life here in the desert. And when we get to that point, it's then that we'll understand more fully exactly the toll that this week's rebellion took on Moshe Rabbeinu. Shabbat Shalom.